Welcome to Buddy Read Adventures. I'm Danielle, and I am here for the theories.
And I'm Stacy, and I'm here for the vibes. And we are two besties who live across the country from each other who love doing buddy reads together.
We are so glad that you are here to join us on our adventure. Don't forget to like and subscribe to follow us for even more content. And today we are talking about Real by Kennedy Ryan.
And a friendly reminder that Danielle and I don't intend to curse or swear, but we are adults who will be talking about an adult book.
And this is the first time we did something a little different with our buddy read. In the past, we've both read physical books, but this time I actually read an ebook and you did an audiobook.
Yes, which I thought was so fun. And I feel like that's going to be cool for us, or at least I'm excited to talk about how the audiobook was different.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really cool. I asked you a couple of times about some pronunciations, so that was kind of nice knowing you had the audiobook to be able to give that to me too, which was really cool. And we had some different ways things were done and different content. The apple crumble or cobbler recipe at the end was really kind of nice for me. I cannot wait to try that this fall. So, yeah.
Me too. Me too. I'm very excited for that. And then, yes, I guess we should also clarify that we are going to be talking about Real. We're going to be talking about a bonus chapter. So all things Real by Kennedy Ryan, which is very exciting. Let's dive into some general thoughts and overview about the book. One thing that I wanted to share is that I've been very fortunate to have met Kennedy Ryan, just as a refresher from our last video, that I got to meet her at SteamyLitCon last August, and she is as much of a gem in real life as on her page, and just when you see her do interviews, she's just very effusive and very lovely, and that reads through when you meet her. And I think it also reads, or it felt to me like it read through the experience of Real. And what I loved about Kennedy talking about this is she's like, it gives off Hollywood Renaissance vibes. We have a grumpy sunshine trope. We have forbidden love. We have chronic illness rep. We have hurt comfort. We have Black love. We have all of these really lovely tropes and micro tropes kind of coming together. And Kennedy talks about and has mentioned not only in her author note, but also in several posts that she's done about Real, that this is her love letter to Black creators whose work has often gone unacknowledged, but who've left a trail for us and who have left a trail for other Black creatives now. And she also shared that she loves writing about creatives, which I think is so fun. And you can absolutely tell that in this story and how it was portrayed on the page and in the audiobook. So I was very excited and wanted to highlight those things.
It's so sad how so many marginalized population creators, artists, even in other fields, medical fields, anything, are really just so brushed under the rug, hidden. So I really love these various opportunities that people take to bring them to the surface, to give them their due, to make sure that their stories are told and their voices are heard. And as two creatives such as ourselves, we love reading about that too. As sad as it is, we live across the country from each other. One of the great things about it is we get these opportunities to meet different authors that we wouldn't have if we both lived in the same place, or at least not quite as easy. So you being able to, meet Kennedy Ryan through your opportunities. I recently met Rachel Gillig and got to hear her speak here in Denver, Colorado. So it's just a really cool kind of thing that we have, even though it is so sad we live so far away. As I was reading this, I kind of felt like a little bit like I was back in grad school, and not in a bad way. I loved grad school, but I felt like I needed to do some research on this, seeing names like Josephine Baker and stuff. And one of my first graduate program courses was about looking at some of these female artists and creatives, all the way back to, the beginning of the 20th century. But also thinking about all the historical dance styles mentioned. You sent me the Hell's a Poppin' video, which was super cool and fun to watch. And we're both dancers, so it was great to kind of see that and see what they're kind of doing and talking about and practicing on the set, looking up and researching some of these dance styles that we weren't familiar with or didn't know too much about because they're very much historical and part of a population that wasn't mainstream. And so having to like do that research, it was really great to just be sparked and invested to do that from a contemporary romance. So I really loved that. It was done in such a positive way. Novel is set in present day, but Desi, who is the kind of historical character that is being represented through the film that our two main characters, Neva and Canon, are portraying in their film that they are doing. And so Desi's story is really set back in the 1930s, 1940s. But the whole book had a very nostalgic Hollywood golden age vibe and feel to it, and I loved it. They were going for that within the book for the movie that they were creating, Desi Blue, but it really carried over into the full narrative, and that was a really cool thing for me to just kind of have that nostalgic feeling and atmosphere, and it really came through on the page. And I love that Desi isn't a real historical character in our world. In the set of the novel, Desi is a real historical figure. But for our reality, Desi is a composite figure of so many real women. And I love that Canon in the story found out who Desi was on a small side of the road plaque. And it kind of reminded me of Karen Zacharias when she was writing Legacy of Light, or what prompted her to write Legacy of Light with Emily du Châtelet. She found Emily du Châtelet in a footnote. So it's kind of like all of these really marginalized, prominent historical figures are just like these little footnotes or these little plaques in these obscure places. But when somebody finds it, it's just like, I need more. Right. And then they really become this bigger story. So I just loved that. That was such a cool moment to see in the book.
I did think of you, Danielle, because like as we got this kind of like story within a story, I was like, oh, Danielle's loving this.
Yes.
Because it was like the equivalent of like a theory of like, who is Desi Blue, who, you know, and like uncovering these things. Right. And you can absolutely tell that Kennedy, like, she's just so gifted because she weaves Desi's Blue story. I was like, who is this person? Why don't I know about them? And then, to your point, realize that Desi Blue is a fictionalized character. And Kennedy does reveal her authors at the end of the story that, you know, she was doing all of this research, and you can absolutely tell that she spent so much time in research because it just feels like such a lush world and a lush story. And she shares facts that inspired many of the scenes, even some of the harder scenes. You were like, I wish this wasn't true, but it absolutely was true. And she shared with me actually a singer that I personally didn't know about, Adelaide Hall, who currently holds the world record for most encores, 54. And she was like entertaining the troops during World War II. And Adelaide had released material, like works, over 8 decades. And it's like hard to believe that someone can produce and has so much talent like that. So it just was really apparent how much Kennedy Ryan poured into this story.
But, you know, kind of also looking at more of what the real life experience of so many creatives, particularly the more marginalized creatives. We see in chapter 4, Neva really focusing on needing health insurance and a stable income, and also specifically stated meals. And I felt that so hard. Why are so many artists so woefully underappreciated, underpaid? And I think back to the pandemic in 2020, where everyone was just gobbling up entertainment, binging things on Netflix and Disney Plus and all of those other streaming networks, gobbling up books and things. And it's like, well, yeah, we are a very important part of society, right? But it's not deemed in the same way. But it's just so sad that it's so woefully underpaid. And people don't realize, because you see some of these really big names who are really making out awesome, which is great for them. But that is such a small small population of our artists who are able to really make a living off of these things. So I felt that so hard because we've experienced that. We know, like, okay, well, why did you major in theater? Well, because I love it. Well, you're going to be a poor starving artist. Get ready to have fun with that. Mm-hmm. And it's just so sad that that's what our arts have been reduced to. So that was a moment that really hit hard really early on for me in this book.
Absolutely. And the fact that you think about just today, so many people who have not been able to live out their creative art form because they're like, well, it doesn't put food on the table. I can't feed my family, or I can't support myself. So now I have to get this other job and can only do this creative outlet part-time, right? And so you just think of like all the potential that we're missing out on too because of that. And that's just like heartbreaking.
You also think about how many artists in myriad of different forms, not just
that's fair
acting and things like this, but also paintings, your stained glass, your writing, your makeup. I mean, any of these types of artists, photographers. And so many people ask, why do I have to pay you? Can't you just do it for free, or can't you give me a discounted rate? It's like, no, I spent a lot of time and energy really honing this craft. That's why you're asking me to do it, right? Mm-hmm. So making sure that we are respecting and valuing our artists' time and their education and their expertise, and making sure that they are getting paid. Like, I always make sure that I am never, ever asking for a discount or for somebody to do it for free for me. I think that's just really important to kind of keep in mind too, especially for smaller artists who really haven't had their breakthrough yet. And yes, the notoriety of, sharing them on Instagram, but that's not really enough, right? We do need a little bit more than that. Another moment that really just touched me so deeply and just really shows why we do need the arts so much, because the arts can change who we are. They really have profound impacts on us as humans, as a society. They touch on so many big issues. Even if they're really just kind of fun stories, they still tackle some very important themes and really make a huge difference on shaping us and our society. Neva talks about seeing Aida in the original cast on Broadway. I was like, oh my gosh, I did that in high school too. I actually went with my high school theater department during a spring break or something like that. And we went up to New York City, and one of the shows we saw was Aida with the original cast. And that was so incredibly cool. That wasn't like my defining moment for theater of what got me into it. That was Phantom of the Opera in third grade. It was just such a cool moment to be like, yes, this is an absolutely powerful story. And if you know the story of Aida, you know why this would have a particularly big impact on the characters in this story, particularly Neva.
It's funny. It also brought to mind how when I was in the 5th grade, my chorus group went to New York City and we saw Beauty and the Beast. So you have these moments when you are, you're young, and it just forms who you are and forms part of what you're attracted to, and may propel in a direction or may not, but definitely helps an appreciation, which is also part of it too.
I also thought it was really cool, and I really like kind of this idea of meta theater, meta stories, meta, right? It kind of goes with this, I love theories, right? I like how there were inserts in the story of the Desi Blue script. I know that I came across a couple, and I asked you, had you come across them yet? How have they done them in the audiobook? And it was so cool to kind of see how they did it in the audiobook. I kind of want to go listen to it now.
I highly recommend listening to the audiobook, because I even sent a clip for you. What I appreciated is that they had a narrator for Neva, who was Ebony Flowers. They had a narrator for Canon, who was Jacoby Diem. And they had a narrator for Desi Blue, who was Nicole Small. And then they had another voice who was all the vocal performances, which I thought was so cool, because there's a couple of them in the story, and you get to hear them in the audiobook. And that was April Christina. So I want to give a shout out to the cast. So it was incredible. And I think that I appreciate and really love when you have an audiobook use the platform to further accentuate the story. Because already as an audiobook, it's great. There's accessibility there. Some people prefer audiobooks. But when you have a story like this, where you can add that layer of a vocal performance, it just was like the right touch. It was added the right level of magic to the story. So I really appreciated that. And I was looking into it even further. And I feel like I need to also highlight that this audiobook made history by winning the Audie Award. And it was pretty like impressive at the time because Real was not traditionally published yet. It was still indie published. And it was also made history because it was the first Black romance to win in the romance category. And it also means that the entire cast were the first Black narrators to win in that category as well. So I think that's truly incredible. And I just want to make sure we call it out because it's so important. And I also want to point out that I got my audiobook through my local library and through Hoopla. So again, just a little plug to say that your library has incredible resources. You should take advantage. Just a little insert for the audiobook and how much I loved it. The audiobook was incredible.
I also loved that there was chronic illness representation in this story because so many people deal with chronic illness and there's just such a misunderstanding, especially when it can be more of that invisible chronic illness, right? Yeah. So it's not so obvious for a person walking around day to day. I have people in my life who also have lupus, a little bit of a different kind of lupus. As you see throughout the story, Neva is talking about the different types of lupus and what her experience is. And it can be quite hard to diagnose, and your diagnosis can change over time as well. One person in my life had developed it in their skin, and then they thought they were developing it somewhere else. And the medication that treats the two different organs conflicts with each other. So fortunately, it was not the case because it was becoming a very deep conversation about how do we treat this, right? Mm-hmm. But lupus really is about doing what you can to avoid flare-ups, right? And stress and sun are absolutely big, big triggers. Stress seems to be a trigger, for my understanding, for almost all forms of lupus, no matter where you really have it, but also the sun, especially if you have certain types of lupus, if it's in your skin or some of the types that Neva has in this story.
Oh my gosh, and those moments where she was having a flare-up and near the end of the story where things were just like really, really hard, like I was crying. Like I had to stop. I was like, okay, I know this is a romance and I know we're gonna get, that actually was a comfort, if I'm gonna be honest. I was like, it's a romance, we're gonna get a happy ending, but like right now I'm not sure and I don't know what's gonna happen, and I'm really feeling for Neva and Canon, right, and the family and all of this. So anyway, you can tell that Kennedy has such a beautiful way of just like capturing you, because I felt all of those emotions. Woo. Let's talk about now really impactful quotes, favorite quotes, moments, key plot points to review, because I really feel like there's a lot in this story, in this book. We can't gloss over it. We need to talk about some of these things, right? So I especially wanted to talk about, throughout the story, there is this one conflict. Well, several conflicts, but one of the conflicts is that there's this rift between Neva and her family. And you learn very early on in the story, Neva is engaged to Brandon, and her sister Terry and Brandon end up sleeping with each other. They end up cheating, or Brandon ends up cheating. But you can tell that Neva really feels like Terry cheated too, in a way, because she like cheated on their like sister, like being sisters in this like relationship. So they end up getting pregnant, and you're just like, I think it's like one of the first early chapters, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a lot happening here in the beginning. I literally gasped. I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
This is going on. I was like, I can't process this. And so like, you just feel all this hurt, and you do, like, I was getting a little like, how could he do that? How could she do that? Like, I got very like defensive of Neva, and I was like, how could they? Da, da, da. And it just like riled up all of these things, right? And so naturally, it propels Neva to leave, to go off and create some separation, because she was like, I can't be in my hometown anymore, reminded of what y'all did, and now you're gonna have this baby, and like I don't know if I can like see this baby. You can just tell there's all these emotions, and that she carries throughout the whole book. I just feel like it was it was one of these like commentaries of just like a riff within a family and how like one act can really like propel like a separation. And then also there was, and I just feel like we just need to just acknowledge it a little bit, is that one of the comments that Brandon said, because they were young, they were graduating high school, okay?
Yeah.
And Brandon had this comment of like, well, you weren't ready to have sex and you were kind of in rehearsal all the time. And I just like felt that deep in my soul of like, oh no. I know that it was one of those things that like personally impacted me where it was like, oh, you're not ready, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, even without that, like women face this, right? And then you have this whole situation where it's like, oh, these pressures. And it's like, oh, where you were too busy. So I needed to find it elsewhere. And you're like, what is going on? Yeah, that like fired me up and I was like, oh no. And then of course, like throughout the story, we get more coloring to all of like what influenced those decisions on everyone's side. But to have that start right off the bat, I was like, whew, Neva did need, right? I mean, you're thinking as an author, like Neva did need a push to leave, right? To pursue that dream that she had elsewhere so that she could ultimately, right, be cast in this movie and da-da-da. But all that to say, like, what a powerful way to like start some chain reaction, I felt.
I mean, we also see, and we get kind of some clarity as to why this happened, but there's a rift between Neva and her mother as well because of this
That's
event.
true, yeah.
And it's all based on, Neva, I thought you had it all together. You were fine. You didn't seem to need help, but Terry did. She was pregnant. She had nowhere to go. She had no money. So I put my attention in her. And that's, definitely something that can happen. And I also felt really bad for the mother because it's like, you just don't know, but you were so focused on this one problem, and it's like you're trying to do best for all of your children, but no one's perfect, right? It was really great to be able to see Neva and her mother really reconnect and rekindle at the end and really heal that and really have some open conversations. Terry and Neva and Brandon still have a long way to go, but they're on the right track now, which is really great. And, even despite everything, seeing Terry kind of step up and donate a kidney to her. That's huge. Even though they hadn't like worked everything out yet, right? You can definitely still see like, hey, we have some issues, but like we're still here for each other. We're still sisters. Cannon's first chapter, which wasn't quite as jaw-dropping as Neva's, it's also a catalyst and really important for our story because we see the dynamic between him and his mother. And his mother has passed away by the time we get to how many years later when the actual events are really starting in our story and bringing Neva and Cannon together. But we get to see the difference in those relationships and how it shaped them into who they are and how that impacts them as a couple and really how it impacts how Cannon encourages her to talk to her family, to make this rift and help mend it to the best that she can, right? So I think Cannon's chapter is just as powerful, even though it doesn't have that like moment in it in the same way that hers does.
Another point, right, is that when Neva, so she's an understudy, right, for the show on Broadway, which is already, she's like thrilled, right? Because being an understudy is still like big deal. And there was a week that she was designated to be in the role because the original actress was going to take a vacation. Neva's been preparing for this moment. She announces it somewhere because of her friend Monk ends up coming to see her in the performance, which is how Cannon sees her on stage. But it was just really interesting to see too, like when Neva was cast as the understudy, she's like, I'm so excited to be here, but she was clearly like the first Black actress to be in the show because they had no one who knew how to do black hair. And you just like know that has happened a lot in the past and probably still happens in some places today. And it was just like heartbreaking, but also glad that then she could meet Takira and be able to form that friendship and have someone who could take care of her hair. And Takira becomes a character that we see throughout the book and everything. But it just was like, it was a larger conversation around the need for just like understanding and representation. And also that having Neva on stage is such a beautiful thing when she can see young Black girls in the audience who are like looking up to her and who like come out to say hi to her after the show, and just knowing that she was able to make that impact. I took note of that as I was listening. I was like, ooh, I want to make sure that we comment on that because that's really important.
It's such a great parallel to the audiobook and the achievements here. So, she wrote the book first, but it's just such a great parallel in reality, which is really nice. But yeah, this idea of hair, because her lupus does impact her hair, having somebody who knows about it, because it's not something at this point in the story that she is telling a lot of people about. In fact, her family doesn't even know. So many times you see in stories of Black communities where they bring up hair is treated differently. My hair is not the same, or nobody knows how to take care of my hair. That is just such a powerful thing that kind of keeps coming up. And hair is so important in these communities in reality. And I also hear these conversations happening in real life. Well, do they know how to work with Black hair, right? And things like that. So it's just something that we need to make sure that we are thinking about outside in our spaces when we are talking to people, working on things and stuff like that, because it is such a powerful kind of idea that just keeps recurring in society and in our literature, our movies, our TV. It's sad that it keeps coming up, but it is different. So we do need to kind of take note of it. And it is something that is really important and culturally significant. I do have a quote that I love from canon about stories. And this really resonated with me and really just reflects on how I feel about stories, no matter how they're told, no matter who tells them. I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but storytelling is sacred. Story must be protected at all costs. It's so important, this idea of like we are uncovering and we are telling stories, whether they are fictional history, so history we have fictionalized, or biographies, documentaries, or if it's maybe something like this, where it is more of fictional characters, some real context or composite characters like Desi from actual historical figures in our world, right? So stories are just so powerful. I know we're going to talk about that idea just a little bit more later too.
As we finally get the two characters together, where we have more of Neva, more of Canon, and there's this like draw that they both have to each other, right? And ultimately, Canon is the director of the film that Neva has been cast in, so that's part of the forbidden romance piece, is that he's her boss, right?
Oh, and all that past stuff that happened.
I was going to say, film. And then we have this that Canon has now sort of like has had a reputation. Previous film, he got involved with one of his actresses and it blew up and it was a whole scandal. And so, there's that kind of following him around. But, Neva can't help it. She says, Canon is exactly my type. Big, brooding, and brilliant. And I was like, respect. Like I feel that about Canon, and he does seem like someone who is like very good at what he does. He's built this career, right, for himself because he has talent. He has very strong work ethic. He also, I appreciate that he's like curated his people of like who he likes to kind of work in each role, and that's been like a really fun thing to be a part of the story. I liked that. Canon and his network of people that he's like cultivated. Monk is the one who brought Canon to the play. And that's how Canon got to see Neva on stage. And she talks about over and over again, thanking him, being like, this couldn't have happened without you. And I do think there's something to be said for that there are these moments in our life where a person connected us with someone, or there was this chance encounter, or there was this opportunity, seized the moment. And other like great things happen because of it. And, I think about it in a work context, like you work with a colleague, they go to another position, and maybe you're like, oh, like I may want to work with them again. Or like they are like, hey, do you want to come be a part of this team with me? They're hiring. And like those things kind of propel us forward. And so it was just one of those things that warmed my heart, because I was like, yeah, there are some people I've met because of other people, or there are some projects that I got to work on creatively, or there are some work opportunities that I've had because of like other connections. And that was just something that I was like, yeah, that's can be really cool when those things happen. And I think it also kind of brings up the larger conversation of like chosen family, because it's also something that Neva talks about, and Canon too. Like, I think there's a sense of like chosen creative family for him, and these people are now close to him that he considers them family. And then Neva having like chosen family because she had this rift with her blood family, and so she needed to have people in her life to fill some of those voids. I think that that's really great that that got to happen too.
Big fan of the found family trope, so I definitely enjoyed that. Canon also has another quote. Canon has lots of quotes that I just love. Yeah. I'm interested in the stories lost in the crevices of history. We absolutely see how powerful these stories are and how they really promote discussion and changes. I have done so much, like a lot of my graduate school research was actually on this exact type of idea, and really focusing it on STEM and marginalized populations. But really, it's in every aspect of our society, right? Canon then goes on to say, history is written by the victors. But I would amend that to say it is often written by liars. History is fact. You can't change what happened, but you can edit it. People often lie and leave out the truth, bend it to suit their needs. I like to tell stories that excavate the facts and expose the truth. You know, we can't spell history without story, right? There's also that idea of his story and then her story. So we think that's where like the musical Six, it's her story, right? With the 6 wives of Henry VIII coming out there. So really that's what a lot of this is. But Rebecca Yarros, that is exactly why she wrote Fourth Wing, is the trying of society in this country to rewrite history and remove slavery from our textbooks, and how dangerous that is and how horrible that is. And yes, we are taught to believe history is fact, but there is always somebody in there who is deciding what is important, how we're going to tell it, what gets included, what gets excluded. And that is really important. Really understanding historiography and how and why history is told and information is given. I think that's a really powerful kind of quote there that really dives into this idea of protect the story. And through this quote, we see exactly what story means to canon.
And to your point, like, we're living it right now in terms of, in our current administration, things are being removed from websites. Things are being rewritten or re-highlighted for a certain particular type of light. And certain curriculums are being adjusted, right? And so it is one of those things that is unfortunately like still so very relevant, and we're living it right.
But on a more positive side of things, I really do appreciate how canon is really intentional and thoughtful, and the people who are telling his story with him absolutely matter. So I really appreciate that canon really goes out of his way to make sure that the cast and crew have what they need. It really isn't going out of his way, but compared to what most other people do, it seems like it is. But he is just taking care of basic human needs here. He is making sure that there are therapists, right? We have a moment where Neva for Desi has to play in blackface, and the emotional trauma that kind of comes along with that, understanding the historical context. There's daycare for the mothers and parents who might need to be working long hours and don't have childcare, right? Can bring them to set, has somebody to watch them, right? But also having an intimacy coach there. And that is definitely something that in the last decade has definitely been picking up. There's lots of books written now on intimacy on stage and things like that. But really having an intimacy coach is huge. So that's just a couple of things that canon is really doing to make sure that his cast and crew are taken care of here.
Yeah, it's a really lovely thing that Kennedy added about canon, that he is so thoughtful and intentional. And it is really lovely to see, because he has this like image, right, of being this like grumpy director, and he's like intense, and he will yell at you, and he gets it right, and knowing like, but under the surface he's like, nurturing, and that's not normally an image that people associated with him. But when you get to know Canon, as we are as an audience, we're also like, no, Canon has some layers. Canon is nurturing, which I think is really lovely.
And you also get the stereotype of like big name directors. And Canon in the story is a big name director.
Yes.
And how they can just be difficult to work with, and how they are just my way or the highway type of a thing.
Yeah.
So it is really nice to have Kennedy Ryan show us this is what supervisors and leadership in the arts, but also everywhere, should really be doing for their people that work for them and with them, which was really great. Switching a little bit to romance. I saw that Thanksgiving setup coming. Knew that was coming. I saw that.
I was like,
But,
okay.
Yeah, we knew this was coming. But when it happened, oh my God, I want a gazebo dinner. Can we make this happen? Wanted a gazebo dinner. It was so romantic and sweet.
Beautiful.
And I know
It
they
sounded
didn't,
great.
Canon didn't do it, but it was still just so sweet. I want a gazebo dinner. I want a gazebo dinner.
And then, of course, like that dinner, right, sparks the first like actual moment where they're like going all in, because they've been like flirty, right, this whole time. So we get the payoff of the speaking of the cobbler, you know, Neva's like, oh, well, I have cobbler at my place and there's extra. And
Yes.
Canon's like, oh yeah, I could totally come by and have some. And I was mixed. I had mixed emotions. I was like, yay, but also like, oh no, what if it ends badly? But I appreciate in that scene, his chapter, his point of view, you hear his like thinking of like, is there a possibility that I could enter her house and like not sleep with her? No. Like, this is it. We're going. I'm crossing
But he
this
doesn't?
threshold. Right.
But he
does
doesn't?
not. And he does it in this chapter. There is a call that kind of disrupts the moment, right? They're kissing, they're making out. I did love, because I feel like I love the when it is done well, and Kennedy did it really well, where she was like making that like moment of their first kiss and first touches really precious. And I just loved how there was this commentary on like, these are like first touches and first kiss, and like you can't ever get that again, right? And how it's just like savoring the sort of sweetness of this moment of these like first like intimate touches. And I just thought that that was like really great. And then of course you have the call from Evan, I think, who like ruins the moment. But it was nice as well because that allowed Canon to sort of like check himself. He was like, okay, like, are we really going to do this? Neva is new to the scene. She's a woman, like she's young, like they're absolutely going to tear her apart. Like she hasn't built enough like credibility in her career to sort of handle this if this gets out. And I did appreciate greatly how Canon took that moment to say, we need to really make sure like this is what we want. It could go really badly, and I'm going to come out okay because of all of these things of my privilege at this point in terms of my status. And you won't have that yet. And so I just thought that was a really great moment of a pause to say like, yes, I'm acknowledging where I have privilege here, and I need to like check in with Neva.
I think it just shows how important she is to him, how much he cares about her. I think he probably would have taken some similar thoughts and approaches to, you know, other situations with other people in his life, you know, wants versus what does this kind of do. And I think absolutely he learned his lesson with the one and only other actress he ever had a romantic entanglement with. But I also really just appreciate how hard Canon fought for Neva to get cast. Like, she wasn't even a big name in theater at this point. And you really see the pushback from so many who are even like, yeah, I know she's great, but she's not a big name. We're not willing to take that risk. And how hard he had to fight to push, and how when she gets that chance, he is still protecting that because he knows that. And I think that's just a really big call for us to really give new artists a chance, give our indie authors a chance. You know, just because a big name isn't in a film or a TV show, go check it out, right? You never know. Like, the next person has to come from somewhere, but also it doesn't mean just because they aren't one of the big names in the arts that they're not going to actually be utterly incredible. We need to be comforted and comfortable by taking risks on new artists, whether we are consumers of their work or whether we are the people who are hiring them for things, right? So just because their portfolio isn't as elaborate, we still have to give them a chance. We still have to look at it and know that they have immense talent too. They just haven't had a chance to really kind of shine as brightly as the others yet. I just love, and this is more of a Neva thought to herself. So it's a quote from the book, but it's more of like an internal dialogue as opposed to something she's saying. When your mama drops the mic. I just was like, yep. That's just so like, oh, yep, mom's got me there. Mom's right. Or wow. I just thought that was such a good moment for Neva really reconnecting with her mom and her family here, just to really go, oh, wow, she got me there. But it just was a fun way to say it, too, when your mama drops the mic. It's such an artist way of saying it, too.
It is very true. Those pearls of wisdom. You're like, all right, I got you. Like, I can't. You did it.
Yeah.
You said the thing I needed to hear. And only you, Mom, could say it in the way that would get me to be like, okay. This is when things start to really get anxious for me in the story. When we're past Thanksgiving. We're now in the holidays. Neva's going home to be with her mom because she's like, great. One-on-one time with Mom. Terry and Brandon and Kiana are going to be with his family. All's great. And I was like, oh, no. I was like, this is not gonna go well. Something's gonna happen. We're in that third act.
Why does everything seem too perfect, right? You just know something's not going to go right, especially when there's so much of the book left. What shoe's about to drop?
Exactly. So lo and behold, Terry and Brandon did not go to Virginia. Brandon's mom had pneumonia. Someone got sick. And so they were like, well, we can't go. And so naturally you have the altercation, which finally needed to happen, right? We knew it needed to happen. But Terry and Neva have the big talk where everything comes up. All the things, because Terry thinks that Neva was too bougie and she left because she was better than everybody. And Neva's like, what are you even talking about? How could I look at you and Brandon and your baby? Because who's now like 11 or something. And I was like, oh, wow, or 12 or whatever she was at the time. I was like, oh my gosh, she's like small adult. And so anyway, you have that situation, which I think was also beautifully done, where they're fighting and it gets brought up, and then little Kiana overhears it and she's like, what? Mom, you cheated? And that's why Aunt Neva never comes around? And oh, my heart broke for everybody involved. Yeah. I was like, oh no, I didn't want Kiana to find out that way, but like, okay. And then Terry's like, look what you did. And I was like, a both and situation for everyone. It's at fault. So then you have that, like, right now we have a new propeller of like dealing with that family dynamic. Actually, they don't come for Christmas. So Neva and her mom, but I appreciated then that left Neva and her mom to have their talk out on the balcony or patio or what have you. And Neva was able to be like, I'm here too, like I need my mom too. And I think that also is a cue to Neva's mom that Neva does still need her, that she is someone who needs to check in on, it's kind of a two-way street. Like she needs to be better about being in communication with her mom and vice versa. So I like that we had those moments, even though it was like, oh no, there's this tension, all those things. I knew that those scenes were important to propel certain parts of the story, but also I was like, oh gosh, holidays are already so stressful. But then we have the scene where Canon has invited her for New Year's Eve. And again, a part of me was like, this is great, but also I'm like, oh no, they're going to be found out at some point, and it's making me so nervous. You can also tell Canon is a man who likes a plan. He likes to set all the little details, and I love it. I was like, yes, Canon, please, thank you. I appreciate it very much. Who likes to have all of it together.
It's very much a director mindset, too. Very much you can see director mode coming out into his real life.
Absolutely. Because she was like, did you plan that song to play at this moment? And he was like, I'm a director. Nothing is a coincidence. And I was like, oh. feel it. I feel it so hard.
It was almost like Kennedy Ryan going, I'm an author. Everything means something. It's kind of what it felt like in that moment.
Exactly. It's not a coincidence. I'm curating this moment for all of us. Exactly. So nervous about what was going to happen. And ultimately, yes, they're out on the beach. They get found out. It starts a whole thing, right? But I did also appreciate, though, that I was kind of like, thank goodness it's out. Now I don't have to worry about this. Like, it's already out. Like, now they have to deal with it, right? I wasn't waiting for that shoe to drop. And I liked that Canon was like, I'm not going to deny it because that's silly. So I was like, all right, Canon, I respect it. And he like was like, I need to address it with the cast. And he did it in like a very subtle way, but in a very impactful way. He was like, we're not doing anything wrong. I mean, yeah, this dynamic is not the most ideal, but like, we're two consenting adults. I cast you for your talent. Like, I want them to recognize that, but I also want them to know that, like, yes, I'm not going to hide you, and I'm not going to pretend that I don't want to be with you, because I do. And he like, grabs her hand, or, to take her home or whatever it was at that rehearsal. And he just sort of sets the tone of like, we're going to keep making this movie. We're going to keep being professional. Everything's going to be great. And I was like, oh, I like that.
Sometimes there's just a relief in like what you fear coming out, just coming out, or the thing that you're afraid of happening. There's just like, okay, now I have to deal with the fallout, the horrible aftermath, and it's not easy, but there's just that sense of relief because you're no longer on edge, just waiting for it to happen. I also really like that Neva and Canon spend some time really watching the footage in the documentary of his mother, like that first really big project that he's known for. And in that, Canon's mom says, tomorrow is the most presumptuous word in the world, because who knows if you even get that. Yesterday, spilled milk and old news. You can't do nothing about how messed up or fell short or didn't do yesterday. Even when you mess up and make it right, it has to be done today. I think that's just a reminder to all of us to really not assume that we can do things tomorrow. We don't know. Tomorrow is a gift we're not certain of, no matter how old we are, no matter what state of health we are in, but also that we can't fix the past, right? If you want to atone for something or do something about it, you have to do it now. It reminds us to really be focused and in the present, because the present is a gift, right? So I really did like this kind of quote, just as that really big reminder. And I think that is just such a powerful reminder for us as readers as to who Canon is and how his mother shaped him. And going back to his first opening chapter, where he is with his mother filming her, and just a reminder of why that chapter was so important. And again, it didn't have that gasp factor that Neva's did, but it's just as impactful for our storyline.
I love that dynamic that Canon has with his mom, and just how she was interested in photography and all of those things was just really, really cool. Want to comment too on some of the Desi Blue sections, because they're woven throughout the story in such a way that's really impactful, but just some of the things that like really hit me. Well, I love that we get her like friendship and then romance with Tilda, and ultimately though the heartbreak of how they can't be together, or Tilda chooses to not be with Desi, and ultimately Desi has to move on, and she ends up being with Cal, and they have a life together, and so she is someone who there's this representation of being bisexual, and certainly like that was very present in the time, and I think that it was a really great showcase of that. And then also that Desi is performing with her band overseas during the war, and is like respected. Her and her band are respected, treated like stars, like making money, like living a really great life, and they would not have that back in the US. So the fact that you have this moment where Desi's mom is sick, and she's like, Cal, I need to go home. My mom is sick. And he's like, Desi, we're home. Like, we're here, baby. Like, this is our home. Like, I'm treated with respect. Like, we're making money. We can send money home to our families. Like, this is the life that we have a family now. And, we have our daughter. And Desi's like, all of this is wonderful, but like, I gotta go home and be with my mom. We hear towards the end of the story that Desi was able to go and be with her mom for, I think, like 2 years before her mom passes away. But it's also this commentary too that's introduced, and Neva kind of talks about it as the story kind of merges together at the end, where was there ever a moment where Desi questioned about like, if I didn't come home, would I have still been this like star? Would I have still been, making money and receiving accolades and being able to perform and treated in a way that I won't like, what would have happened, right? Kind of like the what if. And it all comes from the fact of like Neva reflecting on, did she ever regret being in the movie because it flared up her lupus? And she was like, no, how could I ever regret this movie that brought me canon, that brought me all these beautiful people that I got to bond with, in terms of the cast, because they formed these like incredible relationships. And we both know that forming that relationship with our cast is just like,
oh my gosh,
that never leaves you. So I think that part was really important to reflect on too.
Because it flared up her lupus, unfortunately, and as horrible as that is, it really also allowed her to really get the full diagnosis of her lupus, but also because of that, reconnect her with her family. Right? This was huge. And Cannon's role in that, flying out mom on the private jet because mom's afraid to fly. Like, that's just such, that also really brought her back to her blood family too. And yeah, it's hard to regret things even when they have downsides to them that really do bring us so much.
Oh my gosh, that scene where Neva and Terry are in the hospital right before the surgery. Oh my gosh, I was bawling my eyes out. Like, I'm sorry, forgive me. They're having this whole like reconnection moment. I'm like, oh my gosh. And because, they were like, Neva was like, I can't go through this surgery feeling this way. Like, we can't, I got emotional. I'm probably going to get emotional now. Like, it was just so beautiful. And then because like, it's like was brought in, Brandon was brought in, like, it was beautiful.
Yeah. And I really understand where Neva was coming from. It's like, you're giving me an organ. You're giving me your kidney and you don't have to. I understand where she's coming from with wanting to make sure like you're not doing this out of guilt. You're doing this because you genuinely want to. And them just holding hands at the last moment.
So beautiful. And I loved that we then, and I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier too, about, Cannon is known for his documentary and his ability to do incredible documentaries. And the fact that we get at the end this reveal that he's been capturing this whole journey that Neva's been on with lupus and how he's going to create a documentary around that. And then we have the exciting moment where we finally get in the special epilogue. So everyone needs to sign up for the special epilogue on Kennedy Ryan's page. We finally get the big movie premiere. We've been waiting for it. We were like, when is Desi Blue going to premiere? We're so excited. And I appreciated that it was very intentional that Cannon and Neva showed up separately. They didn't sit together. They really wanted the movie and the talent of the entire cast to really like come through and not be distracted by them as a couple. And then finally, they have all their schmoozing time and then they get to be together in their little moment. And you have Cannon being the director that he is. And he's like planned for this special moment where they can drive to the set of the Savoy and have their little moment, have their little, spoilers, little proposal moment. And it was just very sweet. Like what did you think of that part, Danielle? I thought it was really cute.
I thought it was really sweet. I know some people can be like, why would you ever propose at like a big event or something like that, or a holiday? Like, why take it away? Some people feel like that after like somebody crosses like a finish line at a marathon, half marathon, and then the partner who was, watching proposes at the finish line. It's like, why would you take that moment away from them? Like, these should be two separate moments, right? Or same with holidays. But I think it really worked here because he let her have the moment there. He didn't do it on camera or in front of the photographers or in front of the cast and crew and everyone else there for the premiere. He took it and did that separately, privately, which also made it really a little bit more intimate. And it's like a moment for them to share. And I thought it was kind of cool. They went back onto the set and kind of did that because, that's really where the romance started for them, was on set. I mean, they met back in New York City and all of that stuff, but it's just the set is where things really started to kind of spark between the two of them. So I think it was a really great, really sweet epilogue. I liked Kennedy Ryan basically going, and it's still up because it's expensive. They will reuse it. I'm justifying why the set is still here. I just thought it was a little nice because, yes, for people who like that, like logic and realism, like, why is this still up and existing? That's a little weird because like they've been in post-production and now the film is out. Like, why is the set piece still here? So I just thought that was a nice little like nod to, I have my reasons. Let me be a writer.
No, that was perfect. And it's true, right? When you spend a lot of money on a set, you're not just going to like scrap all of it. You're going to try to reuse it. You're going to try to like, jazz it up or like change it for something else. So yeah, for those of us who like to overthink certain things, we're like, that wouldn't really work. It was a really lovely button, a lovely conclusion to like what we wanted. Kennedy knew we needed the premiere. She knew we wanted the opening for the movie. We wanted everyone to applaud. We wanted the audience reaction. We wanted that hint that Neva was going to be received an acclaimed actress, that she like worked her ass off and paid off. And I think that we all needed that. So kudos. I give a standing ovation to Kennedy for this, for sure.
It also kind of brought us back to that idea of the nostalgia and the golden age of Hollywood. They talk about, well, we're shooting it with old film, right? We're not doing all the digital stuff. We're going back to that, and how originally Canon wanted to shoot more on location stuff, but there were multiple reasons why they weren't going to do that. And so, okay, well, most, golden age Hollywood films are like on built sets. They're on backlots. That's where they're filmed. They don't go on location. So it was that nice little reminder of the nostalgia and like going back to that old Hollywood vibe. So it was a nice little way to end it in terms of that reminder and connection back to the movie and Desi's story that is so prominent in this novel as well. So I just absolutely loved that. Yeah.
This was such a fun read.
Yeah. And Stacey, thank you for like suggesting this one for us, because this was really kind of your pick. Such a great contemporary romance, such a fantastic one, and very different from Kindred's Curse Saga, which we just finished covering. But it was just wonderful and a very different way to kind of approach it. So, your theories person goes into research mode when there aren't theories to go into. So it was definitely kind of a nice change there to go from theories to research in my crazy brain.
And the vibes were still vibing, so I was good.
Thank you all for joining us on this journey with Real. Kennedy Ryan, amazing book. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. Soon we will be announcing our next coverage. So stay tuned for that. That will be coming soon. And we're definitely really excited for this one too. So thank you for being here on this adventure with us today. And we'll see you again real soon.
Thank you all so much.